The ocean liner. No other form of transportation has ever offered the traveler more comfort and elegance than these sleek and luxurious ships. The development and growth of modern luxury ocean liners and cruise ships spans 2 centuries. And from the very beginning, one name has remained at the forefront: Cunard. It was the 1830s, and the era of transatlantic travel by steamship was just dawning. Steamships offered predictability, something that the sailing packets, dependent on the wind, couldn't match. And it was this potential for dependability that caught the imagination of a Nova Scotian named Samuel Cunard. Cunard was an entrepreneur who had amassed a fortune in mercantile shipping. But his dream was to build a steamship line that would cross the Atlantic Ocean. That dream would soon become a reality. In 1838, the British Admiralty, in charge of mail contracts, requested bids for regular transatlantic mail service. Striking a partnership with British shipowners George Burns and David McIver, Cunard planned a fleet of 4 side-wheel steamers: Britannia, Acadia, Columbia, and Caledonia. At a constant speed of 8.5 knots, and with regularly scheduled departures, Cunard's paddle steamers promised to cut the time it took to deliver a letter across the ocean from 6 or 12 weeks to only 2. On July 4th, 1840, Cunard's first ship, Britannia, sailed from Liverpool on her maiden voyage with Cunard himself aboard. 2 weeks later, she arrived in Boston, right on schedule. The crossing was a triumph for Cunard and for the city of Boston, which gave him a royal welcome. On the day of his arrival, he received no fewer than 1,873 dinner invitations. The city also presented him with a giant 2.5-foot-high silver trophy with Britannia embossed on the side. Today, this trophy is proudly displayed on board the QE2. Cunard's venture was a huge commercial success. For $100 each, 115 first-class passengers would enjoy a transatlantic voyage in unprecedented comfort and luxury. On the top deck of the Britannia, they could feast their way across the Atlantic in the Grand Saloon, as the expansive dining and entertainment room was called. Regular, reliable, and better service became Cunard's trademark as he continued to add larger and faster paddle steamers to his fleet. But Cunard never compromised speed for safety. The watchword to his captains was always, safety first. Boston remained Cunard's only U.S. port of call until 1844, when Boston Harbor froze solid and a 7-mile-long channel had to be cut through the ice to free the Britannia. The next year, Cunard shifted his operations to New York. In 1854, the Crimean War broke out in Europe, and 8 Cunard ships were leased for troop transport. With their speed and efficient design, they were superior to any military transport ship at that time. Because of his contribution to the British war effort, Cunard was made a baronet in 1859. In the years prior to the American Civil War, Cunard continued to expand his fleet with shipbuilding improvements and modern designs that replaced the wooden hull with a stronger iron one. The Cunard Persia entered service in 1856. 3 times the size of Britannia, she was the fastest ship of her day. Persia and her slightly larger sister ship, Scotia, were considered to be the most beautiful paddle steamers ever to cross the Atlantic. But a dramatic new technological development was to change ocean travel forever. It was called the propeller. Ships driven by the screw propeller, as it was called, required less engine space and fuel and could carry more passengers and freight. Cunard's first screw propeller ship to cross the Atlantic was the China, entering service in 1862. Samuel Cunard had realized his dream. And when he died in 1865 at age 78, he left behind a fortune of almost $2 million and a thriving steamship line. His son, Edward, would continue his father's work. 1881. The flow of immigrants to America was at its height, and steel had replaced iron in the hulls of all large ships. The Serbia was Cunard's first steel ship, to be followed a few years later by the giant Campania, the fastest ship afloat. In its day, the Campania was the ultimate in 19th century Victorian luxury. Overstuffed chairs, heavily carved furniture, and ornate woodwork filled her plush interiors. As the new century began, ship propulsion was about to undergo another major technological advance. This time, it was the steam turbine engine, invented by Charles Parsons. Cunard wasted no time in putting steam turbines to work in a pair of giant new sister ships that would become symbols of maritime excellence, the Mauretania and Lusitania. Entering service in 1907, they surpassed all other ocean liners afloat. Almost 770 feet long, weighing over 31,000 tons, and driven by 4 turbine-powered propellers, they were the largest and fastest liners in the world. And each ship, in its own way, would make history. The Mauretania was magnificent, with interiors of beautifully carved dark wood that gave her the look of a gentleman's club. Her sister ship, Lusitania, was equally grand, with much lighter interiors and bright, airy public rooms. When it came to speed, Mauretania was the most popular. In June 1909, the Mauretania crossed the Atlantic in 4 days, 17 hours, and 21 minutes, at a speed of just over 26 knots. It was a record she would hold for 22 years. During the First World War, the Mauretania became a troop transport and hospital, while the Lusitania continued to carry passengers. Then, on May 7, 1915, a torpedo from a German U-boat hit the Lusitania. She sank in just 18 minutes, taking with her almost 1,200 people. Another Cunard ship, the Carpathia, would make history in a different way. It was early morning on April 15, 1912. The Carpathia was steaming across the North Atlantic for the Mediterranean when a distress call was received over her wireless. Listening in disbelief, Captain Rostrom swung the Carpathia around and headed full speed for the sinking Titanic. Although she arrived after the great ship had sunk, Carpathia's heroic rescue effort saved 705 people from the icy waters. The Great War had taken its toll on virtually everyone, including Cunard, which had to rebuild almost half its fleet. The new Cunard ships were smaller, and instead of transporting soldiers to Europe, they carried students, tourists who wanted to see the world. With the stock market crash of 1929, passenger travel came to a virtual standstill, and ships rotted at their piers. Many of the great liners, including the Mauretania, simply had to be scrapped. As the Depression wore on, Cunard recognized the need to bring more efficient and modern ships into service. In 1934, Cunard merged with its old rival, White Star Line, to form Cunard White Star Line. And through this merger came a ship that would become a legend.
And now for the christening by the Queen.
Who named this ship the Queen Mary.
The Queen Mary began service in 1936 and was soon followed by her sister ship, Queen Elizabeth. At over 1,000 feet in length and weighing more than 80,000 tons each, these ships began a new era for Cunard. In England, the German Blitz has begun, and the Queen Elizabeth makes a secret dash to New York to avoid being caught by German bombers. During World War II, both Queens would become troop transports, and in July 1943, the Queen Mary would carry the largest number of passengers ever on an ocean liner. a record 16,683 U.S. soldiers. Winston Churchill remarked that because of their ability to carry troops, the Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth helped shorten the war by a full year. After the war, as the Cunard Queens went back to work carrying passengers across the ocean, a new idea was taking shape at Cunard. The idea of a ship designed just for cruising. In 1947, Cunard made that idea a reality with Coronia, the most luxurious ship ever to sail. She arrived in New York in 1949. The Green Goddess, they called her, because of her green hull. She was beautiful, inside and out. Her passenger space superb. Her large open decks perfect for warm weather cruising. Her service exceptional. Traveling around the world, she was the ultimate luxury vessel of her time. 1957, 12 Cunard ships were in service, including the Queens and Coronia, carrying the rich and famous to ports of call around the world. It was one of Cunard's greatest years. In 1958, the first commercial jet began overseas service to London, and within a year, more than half the transatlantic passengers were traveling by air. By the mid-1960s, many ships, including the Queen's, now 30 years old, had seen their best days. It was time for a new ship and a new era. She would be the first ship ever designed as a dual-purpose vessel for transatlantic crossings and warm weather cruising. She would be carefully planned and engineered to a size and proportion that would enable her to circumnavigate the globe by traveling through the Panama Canal. And she would offer all the amenities of a contemporary lifestyle. She would be called Queen Elizabeth II, or QE2 for short. With her glorious maiden arrival in New York in May 1969, the modern-day cruise industry began. Over the next 2 decades, QE2 celebrated many triumphs and was cheered by thousands on her many maiden calls. The last of the great superliners, she carried British war troops to the Falkland Islands. And she played a key role in the July 4th Liberty Weekend festivities in New York City. In 1986, a $130 million investment would bring to a close the age of steam and launch a second life for QE2 under diesel-electric power. Today, Cunard is the only cruise line offering 3 distinctive types of cruise experiences to the luxury market. The prestigious QE2, a city at sea, is the only ocean liner still offering regular transatlantic service, providing passengers the widest range of facilities, accommodations, rates, and schedules. Aboard Saga Fjord and Vista Fjord, vacationers can discover the classic cruise experience, featuring the ultimate in personalized service and luxurious single-seating dining. 2 of the world's top-rated traditional cruise ships, they were acquired in 1983 as part of Norwegian American Cruises. Saga Fjord is as close to the splendid Coronia as is possible today. Sea Goddess 1 and Sea Goddess 2 are the world's preeminent vessels for yacht-like cruising. Acquired by Cunard in 1986, they afford just 58 couples unprecedented luxury in an intimate, unstructured environment. Apart from its luxury cruise offerings, Cunard provides the best of informal cruising on its Cunard Countess and Cunard Princess. With a fleet of 7 vessels, Cunard offers more vacations involving the sea than any other cruise line afloat. Britannia, Mauritania, Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth, Coronia, the QE2, Saga Fjord, Vista Fjord. For a century and a half, these and other great Cunard ships have built a tradition of luxury and innovation. That tradition continues.